You're listening to Beyond the Measure, episode 30. Listen as I, a young choir director, and my husband, a young composer, interview other music educators in order to gain insight into their own success in the classroom. We have a lot to learn, and we want you to learn with us. No matter your age, ensemble, or experience, this is the ideal podcast for music educators, composers, and students alike. So join us as we go beyond the measure. Welcome back to another episode of Beyond the Measure. I'm your co-host, Kara.
And I'm the other co-host, Christian.
And yeah, we are the hosts of Beyond the Measure.
That's right. In case you didn't know, if this is your first time joining us, thank you. This is a podcast where we just talk to a bunch of amazing music educators just to learn all about what they do well in the classroom so that you and we as well can do better ourselves in the classroom, because it's a very important thing and we need more of it in the world.
Well, how have things been, Christian?
Well, they've been good. As of recording this, last week, I was all across DFW area, Dallas-Fort Worth, recruiting for Hardin-Simmons University. In case you haven't heard, in some of the previous episodes I've talked about my full-time day job, I guess you could call it. I'm an admissions counselor at Hardin-Simmons, where we both went to school, our alma mater. And so, yeah, it's always fun going and traveling around, talking to students, and especially talking to music students, students interested in music. That's a really cool thing that not a lot of people get to see, is just finding high school students who are already at the point where, where we were in high school, that know, okay, I want to go to college, I want to study music, that's what I want to do with my life. And so really, really cool. I've actually recommended this podcast to some of them as a resource, just because I'm like, hey, you might as well start learning now if that's what you're going to do going forward. So it's been fun. How have you been, Kara?
I've been pretty good. We've I guess whenever this comes out, we have just started the second 6 weeks of the school year, which is just insane that this first 6 weeks seems to have gone by so slow yet so fast at the same time. But you can kind of tell that it's about to start the second 6 weeks, because the newness of the school year it has worn off on the kids and on me, and so now it's just like, okay, we're still doing this, guys. Like,
well, you were just up the other night making a new seating chart, weren't you?
Yeah. 2 days ago, I was making a seating chart for my 47 sixth graders, girls that I have, who just are chatty. They're a chatty group. So they weren't happy the next day where they were, but you got to do what you got to do.
Yeah, so that's where we're at. But we'll quit going on and on about our own stuff, but we'll get right into the episode. We have a very special guest on our show today. I say special guest every time because they're all special, and we love having them. But today's guest is especially awesome because we have Dr. Frank Eychaner, who at the time when we recorded this, actually he was kind of already in the process of transitioning out. But in the past, he was the choir director at the University of Texas at Permian Basin. And again, if you've been listening to this show, you will know that Frank is the one that actually commissioned me to write a choral piece for his ensemble at UTPB, and it's called Shockachi. And that's the same piece that Sarah Gleason, who we had on the show just a few episodes ago, her choir did a shortened version of that. So it's been really cool how Frank presented that kind of opportunity for me in commissioning me, and then eventually got me connected to Sarah because of that, even though that was just kind of an indirect result of that. So just a cool example of how commissioning composers is really beneficial for people like me and for everyone involved. But Frank is awesome. I got to go work with his choir at UTPB. Really, really great group. And they've done a lot of great stuff over there. They commission multiple composers a year, which is a really cool thing. But now Frank is actually now in a new position this year, and he is the Director of Choral Activities at the University of Central Arkansas, which I found out is in Conway, Arkansas, which is actually where my family, we lived there for like 6 months when I was in kindergarten. That's actually where I started grade school and kindergarten was in Conway, Arkansas. So fun fact there, it was before we moved to Kansas City later that year. So anyways, fun facts there. But Frank is awesome, really great conductor. Because I got to go and work with his students, I really got to see and experience what he is like in rehearsals. And he's so fun. He knows what he's doing. He's serious. He's very succinct with how he conducts and how he teaches while keeping it fun all at the same time. But today, the topic that we focused on for this discussion was what Frank likes to call sustainability in the profession. So basically, how can you sustain yourself physically, emotionally, spiritually, all those different aspects so that you can continue to do your best work? Am I saying that right, Kara?
Yeah.
So we will have show notes in the description. Again, we've started having actual show notes that you can download just from a Google Drive link, so you can kind of have an outline of all the great points that our guests touch on all throughout these episodes. So without further ado, enjoy our interview with Dr. Frank Eychaner. Frank, thank you so much for being on the show with us today. We really appreciate it.
Of course, delighted to be with you.
Yeah, well, I'm excited for this one because we both have a very special relationship with you, and especially for me as a composer. You were one of the first people that really I like to say. Was one of my first big commissions because it was right. It was with an actual full-on college level ensemble, and so that was exciting for me. But Kara, do you want to tell our listeners kind of how we met Frank?
Yeah, sure. Well, I guess it was almost 2 years ago now.
Yeah, about 2 years.
Is that all? It seems like it's been longer.
No, it really has. I was in the Midland, Odessa area taking some students to audition for, I guess, the second round of All Region, and it was also the Region Clinic and Concert. And I just remember all the kids were eating pizza, and I was just kind of standing there, and you came up to me and you introduced yourself to me, and then we got on the topic of Christian, and you're like, oh, well, I love to commission people all the time, so whenever he gets here tomorrow, like, get in contact with him. So then they networked, and yeah, and then here we are.
Yep, it's a small world. It's funny how those, happy moments turn into, a relationship, and then commissioning, and of course having you come and work with our choir, and then of course being able to perform your music at National ACDA. Pretty cool.
Yeah, yeah. The whole, from start to finish, the whole process was just so beneficial to me especially as a young composer, because, like I just said before, I'd never really done anything quite at that level before. And then, as you just mentioned, going out and actually working with your choir, and then on top of that, getting a performance at ACDA. Those were all big firsts for me, and that was the main reason I ended up even going to ACDA and having my own little booth there. And so I'm just very grateful for all the opportunities that you provided to me. So it's been great.
Well, thank you. It's been a privilege to be a part of your journey in a small way, and looking forward to our next chapter. Ooh,
yeah, that's right. Which leads me to the first question. So tell us where you just were and where you are now, and then just kind of tell us your story, and you can go in however much depth you want with that, and kind of just how you got to where you are now.
Well, let me start with where I'm at now. I've recently accepted a position as Director of Choral Activities at the University of Central Arkansas. I'm at UCA for a number of reasons. It's a legacy program. There's just been a lot of choral success here for decades and decades and decades. It's a larger program. I'm looking forward to directing a choir of 65, 70 students in the concert choir, and then 30 or so in a very, very highly auditioned chamber choir. And then I'll also be teaching graduate students for the first time. So that's super exciting. That's been one of my professional aspirations for many, many years, was to be able to work with graduate students. And then the second part of my answer to why UCA is really, really relevant to what our conversation is going to be about tonight. I spent 9 years at the University of Texas Permian Basin and loved the job, loved the people in West Texas, but didn't enjoy living in West Texas.
Fair.
And very, very different than West Texas. Conway is beautiful. There's grass, there's there's trees, there's mountains. I spent yesterday after church, I went and took my dogs and went fishing all afternoon, and just caught a whole bunch of little fish in a little random creek in a national forest. And just having the opportunity to do those things, I think, makes us better people, better partners, better friends, better teachers, because we are working from a place of wholeness and being able to pour out because I'm full. I mentioned that I was at University of Texas Permian Basin for 9 years. When I got to the University of Texas Permian Basin, there was 9 people in one choir. And this year we had 5 ensembles at the university, so experienced an incredible period of growth. A ton of reasons for that. At the top of that list would be just really great teachers in West Texas. Kara certainly would be on that list. Just producing really, really highly qualified students that are ready to come in and work hard. And we just, with a lot of really great team members there, we were able to create an environment where people could come in and have good opportunities and experience success. And of course, the choir performed it nationally at CDA this year, which is, but one of my probably most significant professional accomplishments. Before I was there, I was at Colorado Christian University in the Denver metro area. Totally different profile of the school. Non-denomination Christian school. That's code for very, very little money and lots of tuition.
Uh-huh.
Loved my time at CCU. Worked with a very, very different population of students. But the common thread is that they love to sing. The common thread is that they wanted to serve. They wanted to serve people. And so loved my time at CCU, made some incredible relationships that last a lifetime, but was ready to move. The facilities were less than ideal. Not everybody wants to go to a Christian university, and I wanted to have the opportunity to work with kids from all walks of life that maybe couldn't afford that. Before that, I taught for 3 years at a junior college and then another 5 at a high school. So I've been in the business for a good long time, and that doesn't even tell you anything about my education or all of that crazy stuff.
Yeah. So you've moved around and you're still moving. I wish you the best going into this next position at Central Arkansas, and hopefully you can. I don't. Do you have plans to move forward? I know you've just made a move, but so maybe you haven't really thought that far ahead. But
I don't. In the big picture, we've been here for a snap of the fingers, but I don't see any reason to ever have to move again. This is UCA is there is a lifetime of work here. Great environment. I love the faculty that I've met so far. It's a much larger school. There are 35 full-time faculty in the music department alone.
Oh my gosh.
Just my office is in a brand new facility. So I absolutely could be here for the rest of my career, but who knows? Life is uncertain. I will never know the answer to that question until I get to the end.
Okay, so you kind of provided us with a little outline of some thoughts you had going into this episode, and can you tell us a little bit about because you obviously have lots of experience, and as we just discussed, you've been in multiple different types of settings now, as a choir director and as a music educator. Tell us a little bit about kind of something that was kind of laying on your heart about you thought you might want to discuss today, and kind of how you want to go through that.
I finally landed on, something that I've been thinking a whole lot about as somebody I'm 53. I've been teaching. It'll be 30 years this fall. And how do I still have just an incredible excitement every day to go to work? How do I still have energy to show up? How do I not phone it in? After doing it for a long time. And so I just wanted to talk about sustainability in the profession. How do we continue to have the greatest impact that we're capable of in our 31st year, as we did in our first or our fifth or our 10th? Because I think we have all seen folks that have been really effective, and then they just announced one day, I'm quitting the profession because I'm burned out. Or, we've seen others who have kind of had a slow slide. Maybe at a time they were just, incredible and dynamic, and they would tell you themselves, it's not the same as it used to be. And so I think I just wanted to talk a little bit about what are the things that all of us need to do to be both effective in our job, as well as to be effective in our life. And so I'm just going to talk a little bit today about, some of the things that make it possible for us to continue to show up year after year and have a full cup, so that from that full cup we can pour into our students and into our colleagues and into our communities in the way that I think we got into the profession to do.
And especially after, I feel like, obviously the teaching profession in general, not just for music, has always been, a tiresome thing, obviously. But I think especially after COVID, there was just such a drastic change in dynamic in the classroom, which resulted in a change in dynamic with students and parents and so many different aspects that I personally know a lot of choir directors and music teachers in general, that it just, you just got a huge weight just thrown on top of you, and it caught so many people off guard.
Yeah, that's a true statement. I didn't experience the same level of anxiety / depression / I guess I'm just too dumb to be scared about, the possibility that
Sure.
I maybe might get sick and that it maybe might be awful. So,
Yeah.
I'm just blissfully, ignorantly going along, taking care of folks. But that said, I think that we did see, related to this conversation, COVID definitely opened up some of the cracks that maybe were already there. And so we did see, people that were tired suddenly, that what had been a problem now was a crisis. We saw folks that were experiencing some professional discontent. Suddenly, they're online looking at any job in any other profession. And we see the same thing in other professions. It wasn't simply music, but certainly there were a lot of our colleagues who saw a radical change in their day-to-day by virtue of the fact that, you can't rehearse today. You can't have all your people in the same space at the same time. That really showed us that what was feeding us, what was keeping us going, maybe wasn't the thing that should have been keeping us going. Maybe it was about music making, and then when we couldn't do that, the people that we were called to serve wasn't enough. And I don't want to preach about that, but yeah, COVID was real, and it certainly had some massive impacts, and hopefully some of the things that we talk about today will provide some people with some real pathways forward to provide some healing, to provide some perspective, to maybe regain some of the fire that maybe felt like the COVID situation maybe might have taken out of our bellies.
Let's take a quick break from this episode so that I can tell you about this podcast's primary sponsor, Christian Fortner Music. That's right, my own music business. If you're looking for fresh new music ranging anywhere from middle school choir to college level orchestra, there's a good chance I'll have it. And while I am a young composer, my music library is constantly growing as I write more and more. The way I sell the music is a little different from other music retailers as well, which I think you'll like. Instead of purchasing a minimum number of individual copies or parts, you'll purchase one PDF that includes all parts in it, of which you can print out as many times as you need. That way, you don't have to stress about purchasing a new part that you misplaced or feel the shame of only purchasing 10 copies for your ensemble of 40. Come on, we've all done it before. Now, if you'd like a sample of what my music is like, you can actually receive a completely free piece of music from a certain selection when you sign up for my mailing list. Plus, you'll be a part of other fun perks, such as receiving monthly updates from me and early access to podcast episodes such as this one. If that's something you'd be interested in receiving, you can do so at christianfortnermusic.com/mailings. Yeah, and so going into that subject, I mean, as you mentioned before, you graciously filled out this little outline that I send to all of our guests, just as they're welcome to fill out if they want to, and so you kind of wrote down a few points here that just from looking at it look really good. And so, I mean, would you mind just kind of telling us, what are those points, and we can just kind of go into each one a little bit more in depth.
Sure. Well, I will tell you that I thought a lot about it, and I didn't spend a lot of time filling it out. So I will tell you the points, but I will tell you that I will likely digress from them quite a little bit today as our conversation takes us that way. And
hey, that's all right.
As we just kind of have an organic, over a cup of coffee, if you will, conversation.
Sure.
But kind of the big things that I think anybody needs to have over time is you've got to have balance. We are just not creatures that we can't live in a constant state of fear. We can't live in a constant state of high. We've got to have periods of rest. We've got to have chances to renew. So balance. One of the secrets to sustainability in anything, but certainly in teaching music, is balance over time. We can't be all work all the time. We've got to take care of ourselves. Related to balance is renewal, but it's more than simply taking a break and having a cup of coffee or reading a good book. We have to have ways to systematically renew our perspective on what we're doing. If I show up in my 10th year and I'm trying to do class and teach exactly the same way that I was 10 years ago, it's going to be stale and boring for me, and it's going to be stale and boring for my students. So when I say renewal, I mean in part that I have to figure out how to continue to grow as a professional. I have to figure out ways to take that same lesson or that same sight reading that I've taught to the same group of 7th graders year after year after year and make it new and fresh and exciting for me, as well as for my students, so that I'm not bored as a teacher. I'm not bored. I'm not just going through the motions. As soon as we become like, the person who puts in cog 4 of the widget in the factory, we're not going to be teaching with the same level of passion and excitement and energy that we were, when we started in the profession. The last thing that I would say about sustainability in the profession, I've largely lumped it under something that I'm just going to call excellence. Partly because I couldn't think of anything better. But what I mean by that is that we as human beings are going to be happier and healthier and mentally more stable if we feel like we're accomplishing something that's worthy of accomplishing. So excellence in our profession looks differently depending on where I'm applying the craft of choral music. If I'm in a classroom with a bunch of 6th graders that are learning how to use their voices for the very first time in a choral rehearsal, excellence looks very, very different than if I'm a music minister and I'm working with an elderly congregation. Maybe excellence in that second has as much to do about developing relationships and visiting somebody when they're recovering from a surgery and, singing traditional music that congregation wants to hear. None of that is going to be excellent in the context of teaching 6th graders. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But for me to feel like I'm doing meaningful, important work, I've got to figure out what excellence looks like wherever it is that I happen to be blessed to do this thing, which is teach choral music. If I'm not accomplishing that, I'm gonna be frustrated. If I'm not feeling like I'm making a difference in the world, I'm not going to feel like my potential is actualized. If I'm not feeling like what I'm doing is important, I'm going to suffer from a lack of purpose, from a lack of self-worth. I'm not going to feel like I'm good at my job. So all of those things, figuring out those 3 things, balance, ways to renew ourselves, and ways to achieve excellence in our context, are all going to be really, really important to sustainability in a life in choral music.
Yeah. So, man, really well said. All 3 of those things. I want to go a little bit more in depth with each of these. We can kind of talk about more each of these points individually. Sure. I think it might be a good idea to I kind of want to start with excellence, because I feel like out of all the things you mentioned, that is the one that is the kind of the foundation of everything else, because you don't want to lose any of those. But I feel like at the end of the day, if you don't have a vision and a deeper purpose for why you're doing what you're doing, it's so much harder to work to find the other things, the renewal and the balance, because it's going to throw everything else off kilter. I mean, do you agree with that?
Yeah, unless you feel like you're doing work that's worth doing it, unless you feel like you're accomplishing some of your professional objectives, it's going to be hard to feel like you want to show up at work.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to be hard to feel like you want to seek out ways to be renewed because you feel like you're not accomplishing what you want to now. When we talk about choral music and excellence, of course, the first thing that all of us do as musicians is we think about great performances. And while certainly that's an aspect of excellence, it's one way that excellence is manifested, I think it's essential for us to recognize that excellence has to look different depending on where I do my work. And this might be a controversial statement, but it's entirely possible that a choir could sing incredibly well and have it be a very unhealthy environment for the director and for the singers. So I guess when I say excellence in the context of renewal, certainly, I'm talking about doing what needs to be done at the highest levels to accomplish the greater good for the singers, for yourself. We have to take care of ourselves, and for the communities where we work. So take any place that we happen to do our job. Say, for example, I'm a high school choir director in West Texas. Kara, what are some of the things that would have to be in place for an outsider to say, this is an excellent program?
Say that one more time.
Sure. So let me phrase the question differently. What would make you feel like at the end of the day, I did a really great job today? What are some things that might happen during any given day in the life of a West Texas choral director?
Yeah. The one thing that I really think about is at the end of the day, did I make a connection with a student? Those kind of moments for me make me feel like I'm doing a good job. And also seeing the light bulb kind of click with the student, like a concept that they might have been confused about, being like, oh, I get it now. Or just seeing the students kind of have that mountaintop moment in class. It's almost never in a performance, but just having that mountaintop moment in class where they all feel the power of making music together. Those are kind of the ones that I think about. I'm like, yeah, I did a good job today.
That's awesome. Yeah, and I think that I resonate with every one of those. I think that regardless of whether I'm working with 6-year-olds or 60-year-olds, a thing that any excellent program, any excellent choir, any excellent choral educator is going to have in common with a peer is that they are intentionally making connections. I think that most people can agree that the maestro, ruling from on high, with their godlike powers, and we're the instrument that they play on. I think most people agree that model is dead. Mm-hmm. I mean, if it ever was alive, and I would suggest that it never was. Unless we are being intentional to take care of our kids, our students, our singers, our adults, to serve their needs, to help them become better versions of themselves. Unless we're doing that, we're not going to be sustainable in the profession, because there's a part of us in the back of our mind that knows, I don't really care about this person. They're just another soprano. And I think that there's going to be a lot of guilt. There's going to be a lot of shame associated with that. And I think that will cause people to burn out. I think people can only lie to themselves for so long. On the other hand, if you know you're really taking care of your folks, there can be some other things that don't happen. You mentioned that the mountaintop moments almost never happen on stage. If that mountaintop moment doesn't happen on stage, but for a fact that your folks are growing because you care about them and you've walked through them and through stuff with them, then I think that you can look at your program and say, excellence is happening here, even though we didn't happen to see it on any given Friday evening when we had a concert. Yeah, the last thing that you said was the learning moments, the light bulbs. I'm a big believer in creating that moment where we're all just completely blown away by the beauty of, that phrase, that chord, the musicality of that cutoff. We don't have to sing the entire 4.5 minutes of a song perfectly. Man, if we can just balance and tune that chord and stop and celebrate that moment, everybody's going to walk out going, oh my gosh, wasn't that so awesome? And, we have the privilege every day of helping people behold beauty, of helping people aspire through what we do to do it again, and recognizing that they're better people because they did it, and not by themselves. They did it with other folks. So what do I mean by excellence? Well, we've been unpacking it. If we were, again, I think context matters. For me as a choral director at a university, now with graduate students, I need to be turning out graduate students that are really prepared to go out and make the world a better place through their music making. Music making to the highest quality. If somebody goes out and they're not a very good conductor, or maybe they don't really understand the voice, or maybe they don't really program well, I'm missing my mark. And so, if somebody comes to UCA as a graduate student, they're going to work closely with me. So I make sure when they graduate, and part of that's on me. We talked about one of the reasons we go after excellence over and over and over again. It's because if we're not achieving excellence, we're going to get tired. We're going to feel like, man, I'm not accomplishing what I want to. And we can talk more about those feelings of meaning and self-efficacy and worth and how they're manifested in excellence. But that's, in a nutshell, that's what I mean by excellence. It's not just singing everything in tune or super musical. All of those are types of excellence, but they are not the most important types.
Yeah. And from what I'm hearing, from what both of y'all have said, is the way I picture it is, like I'm thinking everything that y'all just said was not focused on music so much as it was focused on people. Music is just the avenue of impacting the people. You're using the music to grow people, not necessarily, not first the other way around, right?
Yep.
And you hear a lot of people talk about, and I'm not saying they necessarily mean this, but it's all about the music. We want to be, as professional as we can and create an incredible performance. But at the end of the day, why do those incredible performances matter to us? It's because it impacts people, whether you're on or off the stage. And that's something, especially for me as a composer, that I try to embrace all the time, because I usually find that the times that it's hardest for me to write is whenever I'm just writing for myself. But it's so much, at least for me personally, it's so much easier to write when I'm creating something that I know, well, this is not for me. And I'm not even necessarily saying, oh, like it's like for a commission, right? It's because these people are asking me to, but it's like, no, I'm creating something that I want to impact somebody. And I feel like those are the times where it's like it loosens my mind up a little bit in a good way, right? And it makes everything, flow a little bit more easily.
Absolutely. You said a couple of things, Christian, that I think are super important. When I was a young person as an undergraduate, I frequently had a couple of different conductors that said, hey, just leave everything at the door. Leave everything at the door. Come in here. This is a special place, and we're all about the music. But if you think about that, that's just ridiculous. That's just ridiculous. How do we leave our lived experience? How do we leave, our mom who's got a cancer diagnosis? How do we leave that at the door? How do I leave a broken relationship? On the other side of that, hey, I've got a new baby brother. He was just born yesterday. Do I want to leave that at the door? Christmas is this week, and I know that there's this big box under the tree, and I think I know what that present is. Do I want my seventh grader to leave that at the door? Man, I asked this girl out, and she said yes. Do I want my students to leave that at the door? Yeah. So, the idea the idea that it's about the music, I think is just, we just need to, it's awful strong, but we need to condemn that.
Yeah.
It's not, there isn't a major chord in the world that's good. There isn't a major chord in the world that's awesome or right. People people are good or right or well or unwell. And so the music only reveals that, and it can only reveal that when they bring their whole person, brokenness and all, to the music making process. When we authentically show up in the rehearsal, mess and all, and we work through that mess together to become something greater than we can be without, to heal some of the mess together, that's when music making is at its most powerful.
It's not an escape, it's an embrace.
Preach. Yes.
And what's beautiful about creating and working toward creating that music, at the end of the day, I mean, the music itself is the model for who we want to become, right? Because it's, working together and, flaws and all, and creating something beautiful, because that's how we want to be as people. But it's funny how even something as significant as that can really get in the way of who we are if we focus too much on the product versus the production.
Yeah, it's this terrible catch-22. Some of my colleagues who are more maybe interested in the music or would accuse me of being touchy-feely or fill out with whatever backhanded insult they want to give me, would say, well, that's just an excuse for poor music making.
Mm-hmm,
but without arrogance, I would challenge you to take the same students that I work with day after day and have a musical quality of the same product. I think that we have to go all in on making music making about the people that make the music. We have to go all in on that if we ever have any desire to achieve the greatest levels of music making. So this conversation about contextual excellence isn't an excuse to explain away bad choral singing or bad conducting or bad teaching. In fact, it's just the opposite. It's a call to make music a call to kindness, a call to wholeness, a call to investing ourselves completely into the process of making music at the highest levels at the same time that we do everything we can to make human beings the best version of themselves. So it's important, I would say to your listeners, that kind of balk at this idea of, hey, we need to take care of our musicians, just come to a concert. And on the other hand, I'm not going to touch some people unless my music making is of the highest quality. There are many, many people that don't give a rip what I think about people and taking care of folks until they hear that the choir is killer. Mm-hmm. And then when they hear that the choir is killer and making music at the highest levels, suddenly they're very, very interested. So I think that we as folks that care about people and are committed to kindness, we need to double down on our music making, because nobody's going to listen to us about the more important thing until we demonstrate that we are masters of making music at the highest levels, whatever that means with the group of people that we're fortunate to work with every day.
Yeah. And I also think about like the people like at a middle school level, like kids aren't going to open up to you or to the people around them unless there's a sense of trust, and you can't just force sixth graders to just, okay, let's sing now. You have to build that trust and bonding with them for them to make excellent music.
That's absolutely true. You can't tell them to leave their you're going through puberty, leave it at the door.
Yes.
No, you've got to walk through it with them. You've got to reach them where they're at. And you're absolutely right, Kira. That trust, you can't make music at the greatest levels unless there's trust.
Right.
And there can't be trust unless you actually care. Mm-hmm. People aren't going to trust you because you say, trust me. They're going to say they're going to trust you because you've demonstrated over and over that you're trustworthy. Mm-hmm. When you screw up, you say, I'm really sorry. I was wrong. When they celebrate, you celebrate with them because you authentically care about them. When they have a trial, you cry with them and resource them to get them in a better situation. When they're facing something that's bigger with them, you stand in the gap as the adult in the room and you say, no, I'm going to take care of you. Not so that you can be at my concert, but so that you can be safe and whole.
You can only take care of the music as well as you can take care of your people.
And that's a really, really important lesson that we don't necessarily learn in school unless we're fortunate enough to work with somebody who lives it.
Yeah. Yeah. And those are the people that, I mean, I would argue that we remember the most, in a good way, that from growing up and working with other, music teachers in whatever position
Absolutely.
that would be. Those are the ones that you constantly think back to. And a lot of times the ones that end up, at least for me, and I know for you, Kara, like the people that end up sending you a lot of times on the path to pursue something like music in the future or whatever that may be.
Yep. Oftentimes, as I get older, I remember less and less of the music that I performed as a young person. But I absolutely remember how I was treated.
Yeah.
I absolutely remember how the person made me feel. I absolutely remember that I loved to be in that space with them. And, it's important to remember that. It's not, that we did this great piece of repertoire. It's that we connected with a human being. That's what changed our lives as musicians.
Oh, that's good. Man, that was only point number 1. Oh, man. Perfect. Thank you so much for listening to this week's episode of Beyond the Measure, a podcast for music educators. We hope you learned something that will help you stress less about how to teach so that you can focus more on who you're teaching. If you enjoyed the episode, please leave us a rating and review, subscribe, and share this podcast with other music educators. See you in the next one.